Welcome to the podcast produced by A. Willis. And on today's episode of Women That Kill, we look at Hilda Nilsson, a woman known in history as the angel maker of Bruk Street. She was a baby farmer in early 20th century Sweden, accused of murdering at least 8 infants in her care. There was no known accomplice. The crime was committed in Helsingborg, Sweden, in the early 1900s. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe and like this video. It helps more people find the show. Hilda Nilsson was born on May 24, 1876, in Sweden. She and her husband Gustav lived in Helsingborg, where the couple had fallen into serious debt. They needed money, and Hilda found a way to bring it in. One that, on the surface, looked like an act of charity. She began taking in infants, babies born to unmarried mothers with nowhere else to turn. To truly understand this crime, you have to understand the world Hilda Nilsson lived in. In early 20th century Sweden, as in much of Europe, having a child outside of marriage was considered a moral disgrace. Unmarried mothers faced shame, social exclusion, and in many cases, the very real threat of poverty. These women had few options and even fewer protections under the law. Out of this desperation, a practice known as baby farming emerged. Women, often struggling financially themselves, would agree to take in unwanted infants in exchange for a fee paid by the mother. It was technically legal, largely unregulated, and disturbingly common. Authorities had little oversight of what happened to these children once they crossed the threshold of a baby farmer's door. In many cases, no one was even officially aware that the babies existed. Mothers, desperate to move on, asked a few questions. The babies, nameless and invisible to the state, had no advocates. For someone cold enough to exploit heartbreak, it was a trap laid by desperation itself. A world ripe for horror. Hilda Nilsson understood this better than most. She kept her Bruk Street home clean and well-maintained, reassuring mothers who left their children in her care. She appeared responsible and trustworthy. Mothers paid, handed over their babies, and hoped never to look back. What those mothers didn't know, couldn't imagine in their worst nightmares, was that the children's lives ended soon after goodbye. Trust turned into tragedy the moment the door closed behind them. Nilsson murdered many infants soon after receiving them. With no official records, no birth registrations, placements, or paper trail, the deaths went undetected. Mothers, too ashamed or desperate, rarely returned to check on their children. For a time, no one noticed. The exact number of victims is unknown. At least 8 children are attributed to her, though the true count could be higher. Nilsson's crimes unraveled because one woman wouldn't let go. Blenda Henriksson left her child in Nilsson's care and later sought contact with her child. When Nilsson refused, Henriksson turned to the police. What investigators found at Nilsson's home was damning. The evidence was extensive and incriminating, and it pointed to a pattern of calculated murder hidden behind the respectable front of a caretaker. The motive was straightforward and chilling in its simplicity. Money. Nilsson collected fees from mothers to take in children she had no intention of keeping alive. The children were a source of income, and then a liability. Eliminating them, in her calculation, was the most efficient solution to her financial problem. Hilda Nilsson was tried and sentenced to death by guillotine, reflecting how seriously the court viewed her crimes. But she never stepped toward the blade, never faced the reckoning society demanded. Instead, she made a final, desperate escape. On August 10, 1917, before her execution, Nilsson hanged herself in her cell. Unbeknownst to her, the court had commuted her death sentence to life imprisonment that same day. She died hours before the pardon reached her. She became one of the final death penalty cases in Sweden before the practice was abolished. At the end of each episode, if I can find the killer's birthday, I examine their zodiac sign for an interesting perspective on their behavior. Hilda Nilsson was born on May 24th, 1876. That makes her a Gemini. Geminis are known for intelligence, perception, and adaptability. They read people quickly, are observant and analytical, and present whatever version of themselves the situation needs. They can become exactly what a room asks for. And when you look at Hilda Nilsson through that lens, something fits. She presented herself as trustworthy. She read desperate mothers and gave them exactly what they needed to see. A clean home, a calm demeanor, a woman who appeared to be a safe pair of hands. She was performing a version of herself, and she did so convincingly enough to fool not just the mothers, but the community around her. Geminis are also said to fear being trapped by circumstances or emotions. In the end, facing a sentence she couldn't escape, Nilsson made one last choice: to stay in control. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To hear more about women criminals, browse my playlist. There are many more stories to hear.